So the first one I'm looking at here today is Joanna's, and that's here on the left, and then over here on the right are her inspirations, what she said she was kind of looking at to um, guide her illustration style and design style on her poster. And I can definitely see the inspiration. So I see a lot, for example, here, the swirly lines and the really nice focal point. I definitely see that reflected over here with this kind of swirly line, and that's guiding our eye down to the main person here, and then the arm is guiding us right over here into the main information. So I want to say that in terms of visual hierarchy, which is a big part of this project, this is really well done. And I can see the stars here and the stars here, and those are all showing through, and some of it a little less so. That's okay. I don't expect to see every single thing in the piece, but it was, oh, and kind of like the swirliness going on here. But I like to see that you guys are definitely looking at these and using those for inspiration. So I guess a few things, and these are harder to critique just because I'm not looking at rules, right? So we're not looking at alignment or anything like that. So a lot of this is going to be kind of subjective, but I can still make some suggestions for you. For me, and this is just maybe a personal opinion thing, I see a lot of the stars over here in your poster inspiration. I really like the ones that are less realistic more. So this one here is more realistic, and this one is more flat, and this one here is more flat. I might try that just because this is so flat over here on your illustration style. And so I think that these would meld together a little better if you had this a little more flat and a little less of that nice kind of variation of sky and stuff that you have going on, which again, I do think that's really cool, and I'm guessing that you learned a lot doing that, putting that together, and it was probably a good amount of work. But try the flatness and see if that works. I'm not sure if it will or not. But I think even though this is sort of a break the rules thing, the illustration styles are a little different in this, and that melding those together a little bit better will help make this look more cohesive. So we have the flatness, we have sort of a realistic type of look and feel, and then this is almost sort of somewhere in between, like kind of realistic, but also kind of cartoony in some ways. Looks like a Disney prince or something like that. I mean that in a good way. It's actually a really nice illustration that I can only imagine you spent a lot of time on. It looks like you probably used maybe gradient mesh or something. You spent a lot of time on this, undoubtedly. So. However, we have three different styles, so I'd encourage you to maybe try and meld those together a little bit better. For example, when I'm looking at this poster over here, this is very geometrical. This is, I don't know what I'd call this, not necessarily realistic, but not quite as abstract as this. And some of these are, so this is like posterized here. Which is similar to what we did with the National Park series, so that might be a really nice thing to try. So remember with the National Park series that we did in 346, not all of us, but some of us did, and we used the posterize feature in Adobe Photoshop to give us little bits and pieces to then trace with the pen tool. So that's something you can try, you don't have to. But I think, I don't know, I think the somewhat realistic, somewhat not realistic illustration style is, I don't know. I don't know if it works as well with what you have going on everywhere else. And the hand, oh my gosh, hands are incredibly difficult. I personally do not try and draw hands ever, or faces for that matter. And you did a really good job with your face, but it does look a little off there, and like it's trying to look real, but it doesn't quite. So you might kind of consider changing that around a little bit. I like your colors. I like, man, this is just a cool poster. I would just add maybe a time here. You have a little typo, and then that's probably it for overall information. So I also want to hear what your classmates have to have to say about this, excuse me. And great job, Joanna. It looks really cool. Sarah G's poster now, and I love it. This is really cool. This is actually some of the strongest work I've seen from you, Sarah, so really nice job. And I'm looking at your inspiration video and not necessarily seeing that here, this retro text effect, but that's okay. You do have a really interesting text effect going on, and I'd be super curious to know where you came up with this. Did you get inspiration from somewhere? Did you come up with this on your own? I love the fading effect. I love these lines coming down. So Sarah, please do share on the Padlet critique thing that I shared, any inspiration that you had for this, because it looks like you were maybe following some critiques, maybe getting some inspiration somewhere. And if not, then if this is your own idea, that's also really cool. Maybe I do see some sort of evidence of the vintage look here with the double drop shadow. That's not at all faded. It's just a nice hard shadow like you see over here in the video. Man, you guys are getting really good at visual hierarchy. So here we have, this is drawing me in. It's the red, it's the placement, it's the size, and then these perfect leading lines. I guess the only thing that I don't know, I think I do go here pretty quickly. I was going to say maybe it would be better down here, the place and the date. And don't forget to put the time and the venue on these, by the way. But anyway, this is pretty good. So we have our biggest bird here, and that probably does lead us here quite well. I love the effect that you did, and man, overall, I think this is a really successful project. So really nice job, Sarah. A poster for Justin Bieber 2020 Changes Tour. And I love, again, this repetition, similar to what we saw with the text on Sarah Goebbels. Looks really cool. You have just this really subtle gradient going on with a darker gray and a lighter gray, and I think that's fantastic. You have some overlay that you played with in Photoshop here. And it's really cool. And I'm looking at your inspiration board over here, and I have to say I'm not seeing a ton of resemblance. So it might be that you kind of started over here, and then when you started working on your project, didn't go in that direction as much as you expected. And that's okay. That happens quite frequently. I do see here, I see the 3 different takes on a person. So maybe that's something that you could play with if you wanted to with Justin Bieber, with maybe a couple of different sort of poses or faces or whatever. But overall, I actually kind of like this, and I like this cool glow you put around him. I guess a couple things that I might consider changing a little bit is so this is pixelated. It's quite pixelated actually, and granted, we have not had a lot of time to talk about pixelation. Earlier in the semester, we talked about it some. But anytime you're working with Photoshop on photographs for print, which this is, you do want to have this be 300 pixels per inch, and it looks like this either is or it is and you stretched it or resampled it, or it wasn't 300. So I guess what I would do is maybe exaggerate that, maybe make it really scratchy, maybe add some noise or add some posterizing, play around with the effects in Photoshop to give it that grainy effect, but make it look like you really meant to do that. Or maybe you did, actually, that's possible too, but I'd exaggerate that just a little bit, just so it doesn't look like it's a poor quality photograph. Add that scratchiness and exaggerate that again. I would gain some inspiration from your type over here. So you have some really cool things on your Pinterest board with type and type style, and sort of using different tools to distort it. But over here, I don't think your type is as strong as your design. So your design is really cool. With some updates, it's going to be a portfolio piece. But what can we do with the type? So you definitely added some effects and some filters and stuff like that. But to me, this looks, I don't know, it just doesn't fit as well with the mood of Justin Bieber and graffiti and stuff like that. This looks really sort of badass, and this looks sort of, I don't know, a little more friendly up here. And you, again, do have such cool stuff over on your Pinterest board that maybe play with that, maybe just play around with this sort of graffiti or try a couple different things. But overall, I'm really pleased with this, and I think if your type gets some upgrades, this will again go right in your portfolio. So really, really nice job. One of the most successful projects I've seen from you. I'm really pleased with this. It's been fun to watch you grow a lot as a designer, and this poster is just so cool. So again, you guys are just really, really getting visual hierarchy. So this is great. We don't have the headline at the top, which again, that's totally fine. But I love seeing you guys try different things. So my eye has no problem going directly to the focal point here. And then we have these fantastic leading lines here, these diagonals that kind of point us up to all the important information. Again, don't forget to put the venue, and I guess you do have the times, the venue. Maybe places to buy tickets too. I honestly haven't looked at very many gig posters lately to see if that's common, but if you think that that would help, you can certainly do that. But I can also see over here on your Pinterest inspiration board so much resemblance to what you've done. So, and the most successful projects that I see are the ones that there's a big connection. So I see that you're looking at all of these fantastic posters over here and gaining ideas and using those to create your own. So in your Pinterest board, I see lots of triangles, I see lots of geometrics, I see lots of excellent white space, I see the texture that you've got. I don't know if I see this type thing you have going on, at least not yet, but that works out really, really well. But the really nice clean palette and the leading lines, I'm just couldn't be more proud of this one. I see the circles, and yeah, this is just so good. So really good job. I'm going to keep this short, but and I know you posted a video too, and I haven't had a chance to look at that since you posted it, but really cool text, really cool photo effect, neat drop shadow, cool overlapping shapes. I mean, just the texture, the text. You really, really totally got into the spirit of what this assignment was all about, which is to not worry about what I wanted and just have fun with this and bring out. And honestly, I'm not very hip when it comes to music, so I don't know if this captures the spirit of the band as much as you all probably do, so I'll kind of leave you guys to judge that. But what you did here looks awesome, so great job. Jane is going for retro, and she absolutely nailed it. And I saw your inspiration board last week and was excited to see what you came up with. Wow, you, again, totally, absolutely just nailed the spirit of the retro look and feel and the assignment and this cool texture and so much of the stuff. I wished that I could back and forth with you guys to hear about how you did this, what inspired you exactly. I mean, I see your inspiration board, but yeah, I wish we could talk a little more about these. But it looks like you were either found a really cool typeface. This is probably a Woodstock typeface if I had to guess, and maybe this cool retro one, but then you're also using some kind of a distortion tool, maybe the envelope distort or something like that, to go around your central figure here. And when I look at your inspiration board over here, it's a really clear connection. A couple of things, and I love this, and so a couple of things that I might point out just to take this to the next level because it is so incredibly successful already. It's just a few things that I'm noticing from the things that you posted. These are so cool. These posters are just amazing, and you did a whole bunch of them. One of the things that I've been noticing looking at these just now actually is a lot of sort of, we have an oval here, and a lot of them will have like either a big border or a circle or a shape. Here we have the circle and the circle. So I'm seeing that quite a bit, or these sort of like halo-y blob things going on. Everything's very psychedelic, or circle and or circle. So you might, yeah, see all these circles, and you see a lot of like really big, exaggerated, wavy, sort of Art Nouveau hair. So if you wanted to spend a little bit more time with this, those are a couple of things that you could play with. Maybe sort of some kind of a halo-ish thing, or a border, or both, or maybe a little bit more crazy, wisty hair to capture the essence of, again, that sort of Art Nouveau slash psychedelic look that you have going on. I think if you did not do anything, this would still be a successful poster. I would only add, I mean, obviously Woodstock, you know when that was, but say we're trying to pretend like this is a poster for the actual event back in the day. You're going to want the exact location and the exact dates and those types of things. So just a couple details to make that a little more authentic, and a few suggestions just based on my own observations from your inspiration board. But again, if you didn't do anything, this would still be a portfolio piece. It's really cool, and I hope you are as proud of it as I am. Macintosh, you're up next, and you have the kitchen covers and a literal interpretation, which is cool. Again, seeing a really nice visual hierarchy and great leading lines here, with the arm leading us to the pot lid, and this kind of acting as leading lines as well. Pointing, I don't know, kind of crossing here into an X, but generally pointing us down into the main title. I would definitely add, so I assume this is a gig poster where there's going to be a place and a time and a date. So add those things. Really cool. I appreciate that you're playing around with lots of different styles here. So we have sort of the type stuff going on here. We have, it looks like a Photoshop effect happening here, and then more of a realistic copper look here. Similar to a couple of others, I would say maybe try and meld those together just a little bit better, because this is Break the Rules, and we're playing around with lots of different stuff, and you guys hopefully learned a lot of different techniques by doing this. However, I would still just kind of pick an illustration style or two, but maybe not three, and go with those and see if you can make them look really nice together. So here I think there's just one too many illustration styles. That's just my interpretation. Your fellow classmates might disagree with me. I also like that your headline is down here. You have this interesting white space up here that looks great. It's space is one way to lead the eye, and you've done a good job there. Over in your inspiration video, it looks like maybe you decided not to exactly do this. So this was a double exposure Photoshop tutorial, and I'm not 100% sure, and don't take this the wrong way, this could just be me not seeing things quite correctly, but I can't quite tell what's going on with the bottom of the photo here. It's flames and a burner, so maybe that's kind of what you were playing around with here. And that's okay. Again, sometimes you look at these things, you play with them, and just because you learned a technique doesn't mean that it serves your purposes very well, and that's, again, totally fine. A couple of ways to improve this, I think. Again, not knowing much about the band or anything like that, but again, kind of melding those illustration styles. To me, I think it's the copper that looks too realistic, so I might play with making that flat or textured or kind of rough, like the type, something like that, instead of this really smooth, really realistic look and feel. I know that this is a lid going over this smoke, if you will, but I think it makes the smoke look flat here instead of floofy. So maybe, I don't know if you want to make the smoke kind of going over it and semi-transparent, or I don't know, it just looks like it cuts it off there in a way where I'm not necessarily seeing the lid go over it, but instead seeing a shape of smoke that looks angular by accident or something like that. And again, I could be the only one who thinks that. So that's why I hate doing the critique alone, because you guys could be listening to this saying, what is she talking about? But I would definitely do maybe something in the background here. So I like flatness sometimes where it works, but a little something I think would be good, whether it's a very, very subtle texture, very, very subtle gradient. Something like was done with the stars that we looked at. I don't know, it just seems like ever so slightly most subtle something would be good here. And then I'd play around potentially with transparency, potentially with an effect like you've done here with the photo. But overall, I'm really pleased with the leading lines. I think I would find a color palette. Even though we're breaking the rules, I would find a nice color palette rather than the realistic copper and the army green. If you came up with something and juxtaposed it with this nice black and white, it could look really, really cool. So excellent, excellent job as well. I can tell that you spent a lot of time, especially with the type here. Oh, you do have it semi-transparent, don't you? And I didn't even notice it. Although I'm not seeing it here against the pot. I'm only seeing it with the border. So maybe that's part of it as well. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Take those with a grain of salt and also listen to your classmates because they're probably much hipper than me when it comes to gig posters. So really cool job. I love it and I can't wait to see a second draft. Moving on here to Shatara's gig poster. And I did not see, so Shatara, I don't see when I go here to our inspirations where I asked you guys to post those, I don't see one from you. So I'd ask you to, when you do your redo, definitely do some kind of an inspiration board, whether it's Pinterest or a YouTube video or just a collection that you have on Google Docs or something like that where I can see where did you come up with what you did. A few things here. So again, pretty good with the visual hierarchy. Sorry, what's going on here? Stop. There we go. Pretty good with the visual hierarchy, and I like that you're doing different things with the type. It looks like you're playing around with several different filters. Sorry, my internet is not the best. Okay, several different filters and effects and those types of things, and we're not doing things in a perfect line, so definitely did an excellent job of capturing the spirit of the assignment, which was to break the rules, and you did, and it looks great. So several things that I would suggest here on a second draft of this. The first is that inspiration board, so make sure that you're being inspired by something and that I can look at it and see where you came up with your ideas, where you came up with your techniques, and all of that should sort of shine through. Second, I do see, similar to another one that we looked at, a lot of pixelation here. So it looks like there was an image that was not the correct resolution, and you either stretched out the image or it was poor resolution and you just put it in without trying to resample or anything like that, but it's grainy. So again, either really, really exaggerate that with both the background and the logo, the Evanescence logo. Either exaggerate that a lot or do come up with something that is a nice, clear, good resolution image. I don't know much about Amy Lee, but I would say that the type looks pretty friendly here. So is that correct? I'm not sure. So maybe you can write that in your comments on the Padlet, on the critique board that I set up for us. And then I'd love to see you play around with a few different techniques. So I'm not seeing anything where it indicates to me that you were following a tutorial and just trying something new and interesting. I do see the outer glows and a couple little things going on, but I'd love to see you try a little more advanced technique and do something a little out of the box that I can look at your inspiration and see that you have followed that. So I cannot wait to see a second draft of this. Just you need to bump it up a few notches from what you've already done, and I think that this has potential with several edits to be an eventual portfolio piece. So really nice job, Shatara. Also created a vintagey style type of poster that looks really great. And I love the link that you posted, Hannah, which is from Adobe, just called How to Create a Poster in Adobe Photoshop, which when I first clicked on it, I thought, well, that sounds really generic, but when I started looking through here, it's incredibly helpful. So for those of you who maybe have asked to make more edits to than you expected, or asked you to play around with different things, this is actually a tremendous resource just because it goes through a lot of techniques that we have not had a chance to go through in class. And now with our dearest coronavirus stuff, a lot of self-learning is going to be happening, and I'm very pleased that you're doing it, by the way, and found this, and this is a great one for you guys to try. So it looks like this was the final project of the one that Hannah did, or the example that she found. So they used a lot of distortion tools and type on a path and texture over here and some very funky type things. And I do indeed see a lot of that over here. So we see the texture, we see a really cool type effect going on here. I don't know if that's a typeface that you found, which would be kind of neat, the ransom note type of thing, or if those are all individually done, but regardless, it looks really nice. And you're using 3 different typefaces, which normally I would get mad at you for, but not this time. They actually work pretty darn well. I see this kind of halo thing that we were talking about with an earlier vintage. I don't know what order these are going to be edited together in actually, but in another poster we talked about that halo and how it kind of gives a really Art Nouveau look and feel. I would only suggest a couple of small things for you, Hannah. I love the really exaggerated photo effect you did here. That looks excellent. I want to say that our subject could take up a little bit more space and kind of come out to the edges a little bit more. She looks just a tiny bit meek here. I would bring down the type and the halo, or basically all of this top, just a little. It looks a little congested up there. You might consider breaking down these dates and places into 2 columns so they don't have to take up so much of this bottom spot, and then she can be a little bit more central to everything, a little more in your face. Otherwise, though, I have to say this is a really successful piece, and I can see that you've practiced a lot of techniques and figured out a lot of things. You know, I don't even know what exact technique you used for the photo effect, but it looks like you, again, kind of explored things and played around with those and learned, so I'm really pleased with that. So another excellent job. Thank you, Hannah. Sarah M's take on Harry Styles, and again, a little bit vintage looking, at least with the type, and really good visual hierarchy. We have this great leading line that leads us right up to the title. A couple of things. So I'm looking over here at the inspiration boards, and I can see this image. It must be kind of a famous one here. And you know what? I know 0 about Harry Styles, but I see he likes to spit stuff maybe. I don't know. I hope you guys are finding humor in this. Anyway, so I can see what you're doing there with this interesting motif. I really like the background that you have with the butterflies and the flowers and the semi-transparency here. That's all really cool. The border works well. Borders do not always work well. And all right, so a few things I guess that I would suggest, because I think this is one of those ones that's about 90% there, and with just a few little tweaks, this will be ready to go in your portfolio. And again, I always want to hear what your classmates have to say as well. So I'm seeing that there is a rhyme and reason to this. It kind of looks like bubblegum as is, and you know, judging from the picture over here, I don't think that's probably what you're going for. So it's a combination of the pink and the shine mark, and just the general shape looks like either a balloon or bubblegum or something like that. So maybe and it's not that you have to make it look totally natural and spit-like, but maybe leaving out the shine mark would help, maybe semi-transparent would help. I think maybe lining these things up to the mouth a little more would help. One of them's kind of coming out of his nose, which I don't know if is the effect you want to go for there. So I don't know. Again, I always want to hear what the classmates have to say about these things, but I think this looks just a little off. And again, that's without knowing anything about Harry Styles beyond a couple of his hits or whatever. So that's the one thing that I would maybe spend a little bit of time working on. Also, similar to so many we've seen so far, the background looks fine to me. It looks rough, but the photo itself looks pixelated in a not good way, I guess I would say. It looks like a mistake. So if it's going to be pixelated, I would make it really pixelated so it looks like you meant to do it that way, or give it some kind of an effect to where it's, you know, you don't notice the pixelation, or find a photograph that is not pixelated. I also notice here, so you guys learn in photography about a separation of background from foreground. Here his hair kind of just blends right into the background, which is normally undesirable. So if you are going to do that, so I would either, you know, make that so it's not happening, give it an outer glow or something, but that might not look that great. Or purposefully integrate it into the background. So maybe the butterfly is kind of going into the hair, or we saw the tutorial that, was it Rachel McIntosh that did it, with blending the two photos together where it's going into the hair. I would maybe try something like that. Also, when I was talking about this just now, it made me realize maybe you could put some of this butterfly motif, the painterly look and feel, into these shapes here, and maybe that would help make them look a little less out of place, I guess. And that's all I have for now. So again, I'm just always putting the time and the venue. Well, you do have the venue, so the time, and just a few little things there, and I think this will be excellent. So I can't wait to see your second draft of that. Thank you. This is Michaela's project, and oh, I can definitely see the inspiration from your Pinterest board, Michaela, so nicely done there. Definitely see the rainbow motif and the wavy lines, and again, a little bit psychedelic. And I'm just going to kind of scroll the Janis Joplin look and feel. Yeah, so yeah, lots of rainbows happening, so that's cool that you definitely took that and ran with it. So Bottle Rock, Napa Valley, and a series, so sort of like a, okay, sorry, I was just looking at the artists. I actually know some of these artists, so cool. So definitely, again, add things like time and exact location. Napa Valley is not a venue or a town even, it's like a whole region, so maybe just be a little bit more specific there. And I love the Napa Valley grape motif happening here. I recognize that well. I have a lot of family who live in Napa, so that's great. I love the texture. A few things that I might adjust just a little bit, just looking at your inspiration board and trying to get you a little bit closer to that look and feel. This is a hard one because you have so much going on, and it actually looks really, really cool. It's one of those ones where I think something is a little off maybe, but I can't quite pinpoint it. So I'll start by talking about the visual hierarchy, which for the most part is pretty darn good. My eye kind of wants to start here with this wine glass, which I'm wondering, should it be a wine glass or a bottle? Maybe it should be a bottle, but I know it's, again, Napa Valley, so it could go either, but the bottle word makes me think maybe it would make more sense as a bottle. But my eye wants to start here. That is because it's a big object, it's on the top left-hand corner, and the color is different. We don't see purple anywhere else except for here. So my eye wants to start here, and then it wants to go down. So that would probably be a good indication that you can put this information, the Napa Valley October 2020, here, because we're kind of starting up here, flowing down, and then we're getting all of our additional information. This stuff could probably be placed here, or maybe a little more creatively. I have a little tension here. I don't know, it looks slapped on there just a little bit, so maybe you could play around with this a bit more. So that's one suggestion for the placement of this text, and I think that might actually help a fair bit. The rainbow looks a little, not that you want it to look super natural or anything like that. It's definitely not a literal illustration, and I wouldn't want it to be, but a little off here where things are sort of stacking. So I don't know if it looked like it was coming out of the wine glass a little better or out of a bottle a little better, I think that would help quite a bit. Um, so maybe play with that, kind of having things, I'm looking over here at this horizon line where things kind of have a beginning and end and flow from skinny to wide. I think that might look really cool in terms of what you're trying to do. Changing the text. I do like the texture. There's a little clash here between the bumpiness and the smoothness. So, and it's one of those things that I'm not sure if it's a clash or a contrast, because those are two words for the same thing, except for one tends to be negative and one tends to be positive. So, so I don't know, just something that I want to point out and see what others think and maybe have you think about at least. And then finally, over here in your inspiration board, I'm seeing a lot of sort of silhouette, sort of shadowed silhouettes, so not totally silhouetted out, but mostly silhouetted out with a little bit of detail. So that is something that you could try with potentially the grape fields or the bottle or cup or even the rainbow itself, because that does look cool and it's semi-transparent, so another thing to try. So just trying to point out some little things that if you're trying to achieve these looks and feels, maybe some of those things would help a little. But I think that the sort of waviness and flowiness of your rainbow, like Janis Joplin, if you changed those, that would help quite a bit and made that a little less stiff almost, I guess. I think that would be really cool. And then the bottle rock's similar, I think. So maybe it's that it's all white or all black, and you're playing around with the envelope distort to make that kind of a little more flowy and a little less rigid. I don't know, lots of thoughts, lots of things, because this is such a cool poster and you did so many cool techniques with it that, again, it looks like maybe something's off, but I can't quite pinpoint it. But just trying to point out a few things that might help a little. And as I always point out, it's always possible that this is just me and your classmates totally disagree. So take that for what you will, and I hope it helps some, and I look forward to seeing a second rendition of it. Thanks, Michaela. Put together this really cool poster with an effect that she looked up, and her link here is to a video that can teach you how to do this sort of wavy psychedelic glitch, I guess it's called, in Photoshop, and it looks really nice. So she actually emailed or texted me and said, do you know how to do this type of thing? And I think I kind of said, well, here are my thoughts, but why don't you look up a tutorial? And you definitely found a really good one that works well for this particular poster. Wow, there's so much cool stuff going on here. So this plane, I can't imagine that was easy to do. I like the repetition that you have going on here. Your visual hierarchy is very nice. So I'm kind of led down this waviness and then down. I kind of stop here, which is good. We want to be directed there. And then we get this final bit of information about the show. So overall, that's really excellent. We have a lot of stuff going on with the text, but we can read it. So this effect, and we have the outline effect and the broken effect, which I like. I like the broken effect a lot, actually. So it's kind of almost a little disorienting when I look at this poster. It, I don't know, dizzying is not quite, it's not quite that strong of an effect, but just a little bit disorienting. So it makes me very curious about the music. I don't know anything about this music, but again, I'd like you guys to kind of input on whether that tone is correct. I guess one thing that I want to comment on, and it's not a definitive answer about how to go from here, but it almost looks like there is not much of a focal point, or that the focal point is a little bland. So this is kind of where the focal point is for me. It's not where I start, but this is kind of, again, the focal point where where I want to land and what I kind of see as the main part of the poster. So usually that's something like a face or a person or an animal or an eye or a main image of some kind is your focal point. So we have a lot of background here. We have a lot of text. So it just almost seems like there's some main point missing. And I hate to say that because it makes it sound like there's a lot wrong with the poster, and it's not that at all. Like, I think it's a really successful poster, but that's just kind of my first impression, is that I want to be drawn into a something somewhere that is compelling to me, I guess. So something to think about. I don't know, it makes it sound a little harsher than I'm meaning it to be, but anyway, I think that's kind of what is maybe just a bit off here. But overall, it's a really cool poster. I would still probably put it in your portfolio regardless, whether you fix that or not, but I do want you to play around with it. I might consider adding just a little bit of margin. Things are getting really close to the edge. Obviously up here you want that to the edge. That's a kind of a bleed. But those are my initial thoughts, and maybe your fellow classmates have some better, more concrete pointers for you. But I think it's really cool, and I especially appreciate the techniques that you learned and implemented. Takes on Harry Styles, and this is Grace's. They're very different, aren't they? This one looks a little more friendly. I always use that word, I know, but a little softer, almost a little bit Valentine's Day-esque. But I do like what you've done, Grace. I know you were trying to decide kind of what to do with the text. I think that looks quite a bit better. I like this subtle texture quite a bit. I like this shadow quite a bit. I think that all looks nice. This typeface with the really exaggerated, these are called swashes. I think I've used this typeface before. It's really cool, but just be aware it's kind of, well, maybe that's what you're going for. So I see the heart here, I see the heart tattoo, I see the red. It is very Valentine's Day. So if that's what you're going for, that's great. I just wanted to point out that that's sort of the vibe I'm getting. And one of the reasons that I want to point that out is because it's not so much what I'm seeing on your inspiration board, your Pinterest board here. And actually what I'm seeing a lot of, Grace, that maybe you want to try, and I'd encourage you to try, is a lot of sort of writing and line art on images. I know you are doing the shadow here, or sort of the, I don't know what you call that. I guess it's sort of a shadow, but what I'm seeing on your inspiration board is a little different from that. So in a second iteration, you might consider trying, again, this drawing on the photograph and writing on the photograph and scribbling on the photograph. I think that would give you more of the effect that maybe you were inspired by. And they're not all like this. You've got some other stuff going on with smearing faces. But I'm seeing a lot of this drawing on pictures. So it's a juxtaposition of sort of vector art and photographic art. So I'd love to see you try that, just because you seem to be really inspired by it. And maybe that will help. Maybe that'll help you kind of figure out what's, I know you said you thought something was off, and I will say it looks a lot better than it did. But if you take that next level, I think it'll look even cooler. So I would encourage you to try that. Boy, here is a typographical rule breaking that I'm having a hard time being okay with. The stacked type, the treat people with kindness. I will not dock you for that by any means, but just aware that it's a definite breaking of the rule when you stack your type like that. It's hard to read. I don't particularly love it, but I gave you guys permission to do that. And finally, I want to say that your visual hierarchy is really tremendous here. So my focal point is probably the face, although it's competing with this type just a little bit because it's pretty dominant, and it's on top, and it's very, very stylized. But usually the face or the eyes, or where people's own eyes go first. and I'm kind of being drawn up and sort of led back. So that's really nice. It does lead me to not go to this type, so maybe that's not the best place for it. But really, really nice with the visual hierarchy. Really nice with repetition and texture and style and alignment, and everything is really nicely done. So I just wanted to point out what I was seeing on your inspiration board here. And maybe you want to try implementing a couple of those ideas for your next iteration. So very nice job, Grace. And Hill. So this is the last one that I am critiquing, although again, I don't know how these will be edited together, but this is really cool. And I have to say the eyes are crazy. Like, I don't know if you edited them red or if they were like that or if it's the effect, the Photoshop effect, but kind of creepy actually in a good way, I think. So, but I do like that. I like the, we're breaking this down into sort of the colors that make up the whole, so almost a CMYK off registration effect going on here. And I don't know how you did that exactly. So I went to your inspiration board and you did something cool here with warping type, but it doesn't look like you ended up using that here, and that's okay. But I'd be interested to know what effect that was because it's pretty cool. I would add, Hill, I can't tell if this is exactly just like a tour poster or a particular gig poster. So I'd add a little bit of information about that. If it's for a particular 2020 tour or a specific gig, I think that would be some helpful context to have. But certainly, again, the visual hierarchy is good. And here it's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of competition by any means. But the eyes are the clear focal point here because of the color, because of the placement, and because eyes are a very natural place for us to want to look. One thing that I love is that you have this off registration effect where the plates are kind of not registered correctly here. And then you also have it up here in the text, and they look a little different. They kind of show up a little different, but they look excellent, and they look like they go together. I like it looks like you maybe made some selections and moved them around, and I think that also looks cool. It's also a little just disorienting. It definitely has a certain mood to it. So I don't know anything about this artist, but it looks, I don't know what the descriptors I'd use without really thinking about it a little bit, but it's a little funky, a little disorienting, a little, I don't know, I can hear the music in my head, and I'm curious to know if it's anything like what this music actually would be like. So again, fellow classmates, chime in on that to see how spot on he is with that. Almost a little electronic maybe. I love the type in the background here and how it goes from a little brighter to a little darker, and then we have, I assume these are song titles that are pulled out and brought to the foreground. That's all great. Yeah, so this is great. I think that the biggest thing that I would add, Hill, is just some context so we know what we're looking at here. And I would definitely put this in your portfolio. This is really excellent. So nice job. Oh, and if you think of it, Hill, if you watch this, put a link to if there was a certain tutorial or something that you followed to get the off register effect. Share that with us on the Padlet. That would be great.